It is April 6th, 2024, and you are listening to Sports Chowder with me, Sam Stebbins. Today we're talking J.J. McCarthy, the NBA playoff picture as it stands today, Red Sox opening week, and more. Stay tuned. So recently, J.J. McCarthy has been moving up some people's draft boards. I kind of get it. I mean, he just won a national championship with Michigan, but what's concerning to me is people who think the Patriots will draft him at number 3. Now, I like Michigan, I like the Big Ten, and obviously Tom Brady was a product of that school and that conference. So it's not because I have some problem with the Big Ten that I'm against him being a Patriot. Now, of course, JJ may have potential. You know, he had a strong high school career, but in college he played for a Jim Harbaugh offense that more often than not prioritized running the ball. In fact, in one game last season versus Penn State, JJ only threw 8 passes. So yeah, he wasn't their go-to guy for offensive production. JJ has the upside of a strong arm and comfort inside the pocket, but his downsides are bigger. He struggled to connect on go balls, he struggled when attacking outside the numbers, and most glaringly, his completion percentage, efficiency, and success rate all dropped when he tried to target the left side of the field. Another big problem isn't really his fault, but it's still a problem when you're considering who to draft. He just has a smaller sample size. There are no sure things, in the NFL draft, but Jaden Daniels and Drake May are better options, and they're just better understood, in my opinion. And again, the Patriots organization have not really shown signs of wanting to draft JJ. They had meetings coming up with Drake and Jaden before the draft, and they met with both of them before. But again, I'm just kind of talking about this to respond to the people who are moving JJ up, trying to stir up some rumors that the Patriots might draft him. I just don't think it's the case. And look, to be fair, if the Pats were picking later, I would be fine with JJ. There is potential, but there's just more risk. I read an article on patspulpit.com by Brian Hines that argued there were other quarterbacks in the draft that could start immediately, but JJ would need time on the bench before he started. Now, that might be true. You could argue Drake May and Jaden Daniels have potential to start immediately, but I would argue any quarterback we draft should have time on the bench before they become starter. I feel like we signed Jacoby Brissett for a reason. He's going to be our starter at least for the opening few weeks of the season while whatever quarterback we draft becomes more accustomed to the NFL. Again, JJ has potential, and I look forward to seeing where he is drafted and how he does. But when you're picking in the top 3 of the draft, you have to choose someone with more experience and more upsides. Staying on the NFL, but moving to a different AFC East team, on Wednesday, the Buffalo Bills traded Stephon Diggs, a 2024 6th-round pick, and a 2025 5th-round pick, to the Houston Texans in exchange for a 2025 2nd-round pick. Now, obviously, this sent shockwaves through the league because no one expected this, but Stephon is a 4-time Pro Bowler, which has been every season since 2020 consecutively. Really, he's Josh Allen's number 1 target, a major part of that Buffalo Bills offense. Now, there had been some social media drama before this trade. Not so much that people expected the trade, but it was not insignificant. On Tuesday, the retired quarterback and current commentator Robert Griffin III tweeted out something that argued Josh Allen needs Stephon Diggs to succeed. And then a random Twitter user responded and said that he disagreed, and Stephon replied to him and said, "You sure?" And by Wednesday, Stephon was traded to Houston. Now, unless Buffalo accounts for losing a number 1 wide receiver, unless they really acquire some talent, the Bills' offense won't be the same, obviously. Now, we won't know until the season starts, but the Bills might be vulnerable, and the AFC East might be more interesting than expected. Now, I'm not saying the Patriots are going to win the East, but I am saying it will be nice to have a less threatening Buffalo offense on our schedule twice. Let's move on to the Celtics. With their win against the Thunder on Wednesday, they reached 60 wins and clinched the best record in the NBA for the whole season, as well as home court advantage throughout the playoffs. Now, those playoffs start in exactly 1 week. So I figured let's take a look at the playoff picture as it stands right now. If the playoffs started today, the Celtics would play the number 8 seed. And the number 8 seed will be determined by whoever wins the NBA play-in tournament. So that team could be the Pacers, the 76ers, the Bulls, or the Hawks. I would prefer to play the Pacers, the 76ers, or the Bulls, not the Hawks, simply based on our recent games against Atlanta, which we lost. I would feel less threatened by the Pacers, 76ers, or Bulls. And in the East, the number 2 team right now is the Milwaukee Bucks, and in the playoffs, if they started today, they would play the Pacers or the 76ers. Again, that's based on the play-in tournament. Number 3 Cavaliers would play the number 6 Heat, which is funny. It's like the LeBron matchup. And the number 4 Magic would play the number 5 New York Knicks. Now in the West, the Timberwolves are number 1, and they would play the 8 seed, which again will be determined by the results of the play-in tournament. That team could be the Pelicans, the Kings, the Lakers, or the Warriors. The number 2 seed is the Denver Nuggets, and they would play the Pelicans or the Kings, again based on the play-in tournament. Number 3 Thunder would play number 6 Suns. Number 4 Clippers would play number 5 Mavericks. So that's how things stand right now. The only Eastern team I'm really worried about are the Bucks. They're a great team, and they have a lot of players with championship experience. However, I'm fairly confident we would have the upper hand in a 7-game series. I really think the Celtics have a great shot at returning to the NBA Finals 2 years after losing to the Golden State Warriors. Obviously, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The numbers back me up. They're the best team in the NBA. That's just a fact. It really could be our year. And now for the NBA Finals, I really think it will be us against the Denver Nuggets or us against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, the Thunder have won their last 2 games against Denver, making them 2-1 against them this season. So that's why I think they have a real shot at making it to the NBA Finals. Now, for personal reasons, a Celtics Thunder Finals would be fun because both of my grandparents from my mom's side are from Oklahoma, and one of my uncles was actually born in Oklahoma City, so I have a family connection there. And I'm also just less scared of this Thunder team than I am of the Denver Nuggets. They are not defending champions. They are a younger team. This year we just beat them by 35 points, and we lost to them only by 4 points in January. So again, we can compete against them. We've beaten them, but not a big threat in many ways. Because really, they just have less postseason experience than us. It also just could be easier than trying to beat Denver because, again, they're a younger team, and it would be much like LeBron getting his first ring against the Thunder in 2012. That team also had a lot of talent, a lot of potential, but they were just very young and very green when it came to the playoffs. Kevin Durant is obviously a great player, but in 2012, he was just 23. It was just not his time yet. So, for those reasons, I would love a Boston-Oklahoma City Finals, but if the Celtics are in the finals, I'll be happy regardless of who we're playing. Now, things can and will change in the next 2 weeks, but for now, with the Celtics, there's not much to do but look forward to the playoffs. Moving on to the Red Sox, they've had a pretty good start to the season after this opening week. As I'm recording this, they are 5-2, which is better than I expected. Now, as I mentioned last week, I had a trial of MLB.TV, so I could watch opening day and some other early games, get a feel for this team, and it's been pretty fun. Although I was watching a game on Monday when we were playing the Oakland A's, and I just had to turn the TV off because the Oakland A's are such a sad and pathetic club on every possible level. We won that game 9-0 if you didn't watch, And really, it was just not competitive. But Tuesday's game was better. We still won, but there's a little more competition, a little more back and forth, which is good. And we ended up sweeping the A's, as you probably know, and that's good. Even though it's the Oakland A's, a sweep is a sweep, and any positive momentum is good. Now, I really feel bad for Oakland A's fans. After watching some of those games, I just saw the look on their faces, and I realized what a sad situation the whole thing is. I mean, to have a team decide to move away is one thing, but to have them stick around for a while they build their stadium in their new city is really painful. On Thursday, it was announced that the Oakland A's would move to Sacramento for the next 3 seasons, 2025 through 2027, while they wait for their Vegas stadium to be finished. I think this is the best possible outcome for A's fans. It rips the Band-Aid off of seeing your team leave your city and leave their historic ballpark, but they're still under 2 hours away if you want to see a game over the next few years. Overall, it's been a very interesting chain of events with the Oakland A's, and honestly, I think it'll be kind of fun for Sacramento to have a baseball team, even if it'll just last for a few seasons. Now, I know it's early in the season, but there's already a trade that the Red Sox can hopefully make that'll improve their pitching rotation. Now, the Miami Marlins are 0-8 to start the season, which is absolutely abysmal, obviously. And there are rumors they may be trading ace Jesus Luzardo, among others. Now, the Red Sox would be so smart to pick up the phone and inquire. We've already been linked to him before, and to finally seal the deal would be amazing. To have an ace in our pitching rotation would be so beneficial, and, Jesus is only 26, so he has a long career ahead of him, hopefully, so he would be a great addition to the Red Sox, and I hope these rumors are true, and I hope that the Red Sox at least make an earnest attempt to trade for him. It would be a stark contrast to our offseason if we can get this trade going. Now, moving away from Boston, something very interesting happened with the Kansas City Chiefs and Kansas City Royals this week. Residents of Jackson County, Missouri, which is where Kansas City is located, rejected a sales tax measure that would have funded a new stadium for the Royals downtown and $800 million worth of renovations for the Chiefs' Arrowhead Stadium. Now, this measure would have replaced an existing 3/8 of a cent sales tax that has been paying for the upkeep of the Truman Sports Complex, which has been the home of both Kauffman Stadium, where the Royals play, and Arrowhead Stadium for over 50 years. And this new tax would have been in place for the next 40 years. It was rejected by 58% of voters. Now, this is more interesting than it looks, actually, because it's not as simple as voters deciding they weren't going to pay for something. It has a lot to do with how these teams are being managed. Now, for the part of the Royals, they had pledged to kick in $1 billion for the ballpark and surrounding district, and the whole project would have cost $2 billion or more. Now, the measure was controversial because both teams failed to be transparent with the public. The people who were interviewed in the article I read seemed fine with the tax. They were fine with paying for renovations to Arrowhead Stadium and paying for this new Royals ballpark downtown, but they were not fine with the lack of information and lack of certainty about how this would happen. Now, if I lived in Jackson County, Missouri, I would also likely vote no. For one thing, personally, I think it's kind of ridiculous when these multi-billion-dollar sports teams use public money to build and renovate their stadiums. But also, the fact they weren't clear about it and didn't have finalized plans ready before the vote will be enough to make me say. A big concern with the current version of the Royals ballpark plans, or at least the latest version, was that it might hurt local small businesses that were established in the neighborhood where they were going to build. And that's a fair concern, It's one thing if you're going into an area that's dilapidated and could use some new foot traffic and revitalization. It's another when you go into an existing area that has their own flow, their own established businesses, and turn it into Royals mania. That might hurt more than it helps. Now, I will say, the Royals really dropped the ball with this stadium plan. But in theory, I would be more likely to support their plans for a new ballpark with public money. Because at least, if it was planned well, it could really help a neighborhood. It could really help the city. And it's a whole new ballpark and district, so that's a big project. There's something to be said about that being both a public and a private concern. The Chiefs, on the other hand, should pay for their own renovations. They've had so much success the past few years. They've made so much money. It's not that much to ask to invest in your own stadium. Now, the fallout from this will be very interesting to watch. One of the earliest responses came from Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, who tweeted out a reference to the Dallas Texans, which was the original name of the Chiefs before they moved to Kansas City in 1963. He just said simply, "Welcome home, Dallas Texans," and then later elaborated and said he believes Dallas-Fort Worth can support 2 NFL teams because it's growing so much, and they have a lot of football fans. And obviously, if you're the mayor of Dallas, you're thinking, I'd love to have a team actually in the city limits of Dallas. It's not going to happen. Jerry Jones would rather move the Cowboys to Kansas City than let Dallas have 2 NFL teams. So that's a fantasy for Dallas. Not going to happen. But it does raise an interesting point about if the Chiefs could relocate. Most likely, Kansas City, Kansas will try to woo both the Chiefs and the Royals across the border. Now, personally, I hope that does not happen. A bit of background, but my mom's family moved around a bit in her childhood, but by the late 70s, they planted roots in Missouri. Now, I'm not going to lie and say they grew up being big fans of the Chiefs, but they are big fans of the Mizzou Tigers, and because of that, they dislike the state of Kansas and hate the Jayhawks. And I will give credit, one of my uncles moved to Kansas City and to this day remains a big Chiefs fan. So for his sake, and for my mom and her family's sake, and for my sake, because I inherited this dislike of Kansas, I hope the Chiefs and the Royals stay in Missouri because that is where they belong. And now, Assorted Awesome, where I share a story I think is awesome, regardless of if it has to do with a Boston team or not. On Wednesday night, Malachi Flynn, a reserve point guard for the Detroit Pistons, came off the bench against the Hawks and scored 50 points. It was just the third game of 50 points or more by a player that came off the bench since that has been tracked in the 1970-1971 NBA season. Now, the Pistons still lost 121-113, but this is still an awesome story. I love when athletes come seemingly out of nowhere and do something amazing. It really does remind me why I love sports and why it's great to be a sports fan. Now, sure, the petty part of me would have loved to see the Hawks lose after what they did to Boston last Monday, but let's just enjoy this. It's an amazing triumph, and I really sincerely hope that Malachi gets more chances to prove himself. Before we go, I have an announcement about the availability of this show. We are now streaming on Amazon Music and iHeartRadio. So if you get your podcasts on either of those apps, go ahead and give us a follow. That is about all I have for this week of Sports Chowder. You can follow me on X at StebbensTweets, follow the show at sports_chowder, follow the show on Instagram at SportsChowder, and like the show on Facebook. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back next week.